The scene is one of the most important scenes in the whole trilogy. And when the third film came on, I couldn't believe what I saw, because I wasn't in it. Nobody could understand this. There were millions of hits on the internet, because they said, what happened to Saruman?
In the history of cinema, few villains command the screen with the chilling authority of Christopher Lee's Saruman. While Sauron is an abstract shadow in the distance and the One Ring is a mere tool of corruption, Saruman is the trilogy's most tangible and persistent threat, the one who hunts the hobbits across Middle-earth and even invades their home in the book's original conclusion. Yet, in one of the most controversial editorial decisions in Hollywood history, Peter Jackson didn't just alter Saruman's ending, he erased it. In the theatrical release of The Return of the King, the primary antagonist of the first two films simply vanishes, leaving a narrative void where a legendary climax should have taken place. So in today's video, I'm going to reveal exactly how this happened. We'll look into the vastly different ending Saruman received in the original text, the specific creative gamble Peter Jackson took in the editing room, the legendary fallout with Christopher Lee that followed, and ultimately whether cutting one of cinema and literature's greatest villains was actually the right decision. My name is Gibby and welcome back to Fact or Fantasy. If you're new here, this is a channel where I dissect Tolkien's legendary work each and every week. If you enjoy this type of content, then why not subscribe? We're on the road to 200K, so help out and join the community. Also, shout out to Jason, Joshua, Timothy, RoboSteve, and the rest of my incredible Patreon and YouTube members who help make these videos possible every month. Now, with that being said, let's dive into this analysis and start where any epic saga should: the beginning. To understand why Peter Jackson made the choices he did, we first have to look at what J.R.R. Tolkien actually wrote. If you've only ever seen the movies, you might think Saruman's story ends at the base of Orthanc. But in the books, the wizard's downfall is far more pathetic, far more grounded, and honestly, far more tragic. In the original text of The Return of the King, Saruman does not die at Isengard. After the Ents flood the plain and trap him in his tower, Gandalf, some of the Fellowship, and Theoden go to Saruman. This is very similar to what we see in the movie, except the conversation ends with Saruman locking himself up inside as Grima Wormtongue chucks the Palantir at him, accidentally missing, which causes the stone to fall outside. Then Gandalf and company leave. Gandalf instructs Treebeard to not let Saruman out, and he even warns him that Saruman will try to talk his way out of the imprisonment. But despite Treebeard's assurance that Ents can wait a long time, the crew arrive back at Isengard at the very end of the book to find the old wizard gone. They learn that he used the last of his voice, that magical persuasive power that remained even after his staff was broken, to convince Treebeard to let him go. There's a point on the journey home where they actually run into Saruman and Wormtongue walking along the road. They even offer him help, giving him one last chance to redeem himself. But in his arrogance, he refuses. And this is where things get interesting. After being left once again, Saruman doesn't go to Mordor. He doesn't go into hiding. He goes where you would least expect it: the Shire. You see, while Frodo and Sam were busy saving the world at Mount Doom, Saruman was busy ruining their home out of spite. During the War of the Ring, Saruman had been sinking his claws of influence further and further into the Shire, using Lotho Sackville Baggins to buy up land and industrialize the green paradise of the Hobbits' homeland. Eventually, men loyal to Saruman take over, cutting down the party tree, building ugly brick factories, and polluting everything. And this leads to what we know as the Scouring of the Shire. In my opinion, it's one of the most important chapters in the entire Legendarium, because it proves that war isn't something that happens over there outside of our reach. It's something that follows you home. When the four hobbits return, they don't find celebration. They don't find open arms ready to welcome them back. They find a beaten-down population of hobbits who are too afraid to resist the ruffians and a secret leader named Sharkey. Through the leadership of Merry and Pippin, who have now become battle-hardened, they have the largest battle known to their land, which is now called the Battle of Bywater. And at the very end of it all, they find Saruman, aka Sharkey, living in Bag End, having completely degraded the home of Bilbo and Frodo. It's one final act of vengeance and spite on the part of the wizard who has lost it all. While he can't take over the world, he figured that he would ruin it for the hobbits. But in the true essence of Tolkien's overall moral of the story, Frodo shows mercy and refuses to kill Saruman. He tells him to just leave. But as Saruman turns to go, his mistreated servant, Grima Wormtongue, finally snaps. He kills Saruman right outside of Bag End, and in a final haunting image, Saruman's spirit rises like a gray mist, looking toward the west, toward the Undying Lands, only to be blown away by a cold wind. He is rejected by the gods. He is utterly unmade. So for those of you who had no idea that this was Saruman's true fate, you're probably wondering, why did Peter Jackson decide to throw all of that out? Imagine you're Peter Jackson in the late 90s. You've got the opportunity of a lifetime to create an adaptation of the best-selling book of the century, The Lord of the Rings. But there's a catch. Tolkien's work is over 1,500 pages, and you've only got about 9 hours to work with. Okay, we'll give you a little wiggle room. You've got about 12 hours to work with in the extended editions. Anyway, you start ticking through the main points of the plot. The Old Forest and Tom Bombadil? Let's cut it. An hour-long discussion in Rivendell? We can condense that. But then you come to the ending. And this is where you face the real test of choosing authenticity or adaptability. In a book, you can have a 50-page epilogue. You can have the Scouring of the Shire as a thematic reflection of the industrialization of England. You can spend a dozen pages tying up each individual ending for every main character in the plot. But in a movie theater, once the big bad guy is dead and the ring is melted, the audience starts looking for the exit signs. Jackson felt that if he included the Scouring of the Shire, the movie would have had too many endings. He famously said that adding another 45 minutes of conflict after the climax of Mount Doom would have been an anticlimax for the general audience. So the Scouring of the Shire was one of the first things to go. But that left a Saruman-sized hole in the plot. You can't just leave a primary villain sitting in a tower for the rest of eternity. You have to resolve his story. Jackson's solution was to film a Death of Saruman scene that would take place at the very beginning of The Return of the King. In this version, Gandalf and company go to Isengard to confront Saruman. There's a dialogue, Saruman refuses to help, and then Wormtongue stabs him. Saruman falls from the top of Orthanc and lands on a spiked water wheel, which then grinds him into the water. It was a cinematic, high-stakes ending, it resolved the character, and it gave the audience closure. But then, this bit of film hit the cutting room floor. As Jackson and his editor, Jamie Selkirk, were putting the theatrical cut together, they realized they had a different problem. The Death of Saruman scene was 7 minutes long, and it was 7 minutes of looking backward. Jackson felt that starting the final movie of a trilogy with a long wrap-up of the previous movie's villain killed the momentum. He wanted to get to Minas Tirith. He wanted to get back to Frodo and Sam. So Peter Jackson made the executive decision to cut the scene entirely. In the theatrical version of The Return of the King, Saruman is mentioned exactly once. Gandalf says that he has no more power, and that's it. The wizard who orchestrated the Uruk-hai, the wizard who almost destroyed Rohan, the wizard who was the face of evil for 2 whole movies, just disappears. Jackson thought he could get away with it because to him, Saruman was already defeated at the end of the 2 towers. But he underestimated one very important factor: the man playing the wizard. This brings us to Christopher Lee. And let me tell you, if there was one person you would not want to offend, it would be Sir Christopher Lee. To understand why Lee was so devastated by this cut, you have to understand his history. Lee wasn't just another actor looking for a paycheck. He was a lifelong, die-hard Tolkien fanatic. He read The Lord of the Rings every single year of his life from the time it was published until the day he died. But more importantly, Christopher Lee was the only person on the entire cast or crew who had actually met J.R.R. Tolkien. In the 1950s, Lee was in a pub in Oxford called the Eagle and Child, which is where Tolkien's club, the Inklings, used to meet. One day, while Lee was there with a friend, Tolkien walked in. The friend that Christopher Lee was with evidently had worked with Tolkien at one point or another and was able to introduce them. According to Lee, he was so starstruck that he could barely speak. Lee spent the next 40 years dreaming of the opportunity to one day be in a Lord of the Rings adaptation. Originally, he wanted to play Gandalf, but eventually he came to love the role of Saruman. For Lee, playing Saruman was the crowning achievement of his career. As he stated himself once in an interview, it was quite literally a dream come true. So when he found out that his final scene, the climax of his character's journey, had been cut from the film, he didn't just get annoyed, he felt insulted. And the worst part is, he didn't even find out from Peter Jackson. He found out while in a private screening that all the actors got to see. After finishing the final film, he realized that Saruman wasn't in it. And his response to this was swift, and it was public. Christopher Lee ended up boycotting the world premiere of the movie in Wellington. He told reporters that he was shocked and mystified. In interviews, he argued that the scene was essential because it showed the demise of Saruman, the most present evil the Fellowship had to face. He felt that by removing Saruman's death, Jackson had robbed the character of his dignity and the audience of their closure. And that's the key word here. You see, it wasn't so much that Lee was upset about the Scouring of the Shire being removed, he was more upset that someone he considered the primary villain of the first two books never got closure. After all, what kind of movie, book, TV show, or play introduces a powerful villain and then right at the climactic moment of justice makes them disappear without a trace? To Lee, that level of narrative importance, built on his deep personal connection to the source material, was now sitting on a cutting room floor, and he felt that he had been erased from the greatest cinematic event of the century. So now we have to ask the big question. Was Peter Jackson right? If we're looking at this from a strictly film school perspective, the answer is probably yes. When you adapt a book to a movie, you have to make sacrifices, especially when the book is as long as Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. The Scouring of the Shire is a masterpiece of literature, but it is a disaster for a screenplay. It breaks the rule of one climax. If you've just watched the ring melt and Sauron explode, you're probably starting to look for the exits. You don't want to sit through another hour and a half of hobbits traveling home and then fighting thugs in the Shire. Furthermore, by moving the death to the beginning of the third film, Jackson created a false start. If you watch the theatrical cut, the movie starts with Smeagol and Deagol. It starts with the origin of the ring. It feels like a new beginning that puts the focus on Sauron. If you start with a 7-minute confrontation at Isengard, The Return of the King feels like it's still trying to finish the previous movie. However, and this is a big however, from a narrative and logic perspective, the cut was a disaster. If you watch the theatrical version, the Palantir, the Scene Stone, just appears in the water. Pippin picks it up, and that's how the plot moves forward. But how did it get there? In the extended scene, Saruman drops it as he falls. Without that scene, the Palantir just feels like a random plot convenience. More importantly, it robs the story of its moral symmetry. Tolkien's work is about the unmaking of evil. By leaving Saruman alive and ignored in a tower, the evil isn't unmade, it's just forgotten. It feels a little messy and a little incomplete. So while I understand the logic behind Jackson's decision, in a perfect world, I would have loved to see a book-accurate ending to the movies. But I fully admit that it could have taken up an entire movie on its own. If you adapted everything that happens after the ring is destroyed, you'd have another 2 hours of screen time. Fortunately, this story has a happy ending, or at least a Greyhaven-style bittersweet ending. The rift between Lee and Jackson eventually healed. The death of Saruman was restored in the extended edition, which many fans, including myself, consider to be the only real version of the movie anyway. When Peter Jackson began to work on the Hobbit trilogy years later, he knew he wanted Christopher Lee back. Even though the White Council scenes aren't explicitly shown in the Hobbit book, Jackson wrote them into the movie as a way to honor Lee's legacy. By this point, Lee was in his 90s and too frail to fly all the way to New Zealand. So Jackson did something incredible, and he sent a film crew to London to film Lee's scenes separately. Then they digitally integrated him into the movie. It was a gesture of immense respect, and it was Jackson saying, "I know I cut you once, but I won't do it again." Christopher Lee's final performance as Saruman in the Battle of the Five Armies gave him the cinematic final bow that he deserved. It proved that despite the editorial gambles and the behind-the-scenes drama, you simply cannot have Middle-earth without the White Wizard. So, what do you think? Do you agree with Peter Jackson that the death of Saruman was a pacing killer, or do you think the theatrical cut is broken without it? Would you have preferred to see a full 45-minute scouring of the Shire at the end of the movie, or was the spiked water wheel at Isengard a better cinematic ending? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the editorial battles of Middle-earth, be sure to like and subscribe, and check out the playlist for more Tolkien analysis. Have a great week, and I'll see you in the next video.